Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mimosa Fridays podcast, a show where we share powerful life lessons and a few laughs as Gail empowers others as she sits at the intersection of people, purpose, and politics while sipping on mimosas. Holidays are upon us, shipping containers have stalled, store shelves are limited. What will be under the Christmas tree? Unwrap your business products and services on News in Motion broadcast and Mosa Fridays podcast with Gail, available to support your success as prime real estate in a committed audience. Contact News in Motion with Gail at gmail.com to reserve your live 3-minute spot. The first Unwrap This Live is October 25th. Don't delay. Only 24 spots are available for $297 each. Contact today. Now grab some orange juice and champagne and welcome your host, Gail Dudley.
All right, he's not a stranger to us. Bam, there he is. Good morning, Pastor Derrick Holmes. How are you?
I'm doing great. Peace. Good morning, and good morning, everybody. Good morning, News in Motion. So good to see you.
Good to see you. All right, you got to give us all the 911. There's so much going on. People are like, vote? When are we voting? And I'll be honest, last month I was like, do we vote November the 2nd or not? Because nobody's talking about it. There's not the money out there to do the commercials, which you and I have talked about. So people aren't seeing it on the news. People are like, what is happening? So I know you got a whole lot to share with us. Y'all, Pastor Derrick Holmes pastors a church. I want to say Circleville, but it's not. It's Chillicothe.
No, it's Circleville. It's Circleville.
It's Circleville. Okay, Second Baptist Church in Circleville. See, I get those two mixed up all the time. I was a contract alongside him with the OOC, has to do all with the election and Amos project and in the churches and so much. I was always cutting up. He always got me in trouble. Just let me tell you what it is. But we were out there and we got people registered to vote and we got people out there. I think we was over 9,000 people collectively, along with all of you on News in Motion who helped do that. So within 2-3 months, we hit over 9,000 people registered to vote. So we should all give ourselves a hand for that. Without going into anything else, Derrick, I'm going to ask you one question. I'm going to let you run with it from here.
Sure.
What is going on with our people?
That's a great question. Oh my gosh. That's a great question. Again, thank you so much for having me on. What a privilege it is. Real quick before I press forward, I want to let you know, and I've been saying this behind your back, shout out to News in Motion and all the work you're doing, particularly around, especially in this season, talking around domestic violence and that reality. You are doing rich and meaningful work, and it should be appreciated. So shout out to you. You are doing the thing, and you are changing lives for the better that way.
Thank you.
I mean that from, you already know, I fool with you for real. I'm Team Gail till the wheels fall off. So what is going on with our people? Let me maybe frame it a certain way, because I want to suggest that we don't get here by accident. There was a recent study out of Johns Hopkins University that suggests that 25% of Americans have no idea what's going on with local legislation, with local elections, with general elections. There's a whole bunch of data all around the country that supports the trend that what we have a tendency to do as Americans is to vote in the general election, right? And then after that, in the primaries, we kind of leave things alone. The numbers drop down to about 30% of people. In particular, in our community, that number is about 20%. Now, there are some reasons for that, and in particular, in the moment we find ourselves in. One of those reasons is because there's a lack of media coverage. So if I'm not seeing it in the places where I engage information online, on the internet, on television, if I'm only seeing it a month before the election, then there's certain issues that just aren't troubled up. So I don't necessarily know that there's anything emergent going on. So I don't think it's as important to go to the polls. There is not a lot of work around voter mobilization, right? What it means to get people out to the polls. So if there is someone that goes, they don't bring somebody else with them. All of us know somebody who doesn't go vote for a bunch of different reasons, right? And so they don't end up going voting. That brings down the number as well. Also, there are there are infrastructures in place that suppress our vote. And what does that mean? That means that there are people who don't go vote in general elections because they've been told that they can't vote. They've been told that because they went and served a sentence that they can't go vote, or because they live in a certain place that they can't go vote, or because the votes are purged. And so they registered to vote, but then these votes get thrown out. Let me say that the way I want to, because that's a real thing. Shout out to Pastor Gail for pointing that out, that it is a real thing to have your voter registration purged for no reason at all. Well, for a reason, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but to have your registration purged, and then you're not able to go out and cast your vote. And on top of that, in case you all haven't heard, we're also living in a pandemic, right? We're living through dealing with the reality of COVID-19, hashtag the Rona is real, right? And so for a lot of people, the idea of going out and voting, even when we have early voting, even if we have online voting, it's still foreign in certain ways. Some people are technophobic, and the idea of going to the polls is just leery because I don't want to get sick. So I want to suggest that there are all of those things that mitigate against us in terms of going and showing up in the general elections. With all of that in tow, it's important that we understand that our general elections are so important. They're so important. Local politics in general is just important across the country, no matter what your region is. What's going on locally in terms of local leadership, in terms of local policy, is extremely important that we lift our voices and that we go vote. One of the reasons why it's so important is because progress doesn't happen just at the top. There's this general thinking in the political moment we find ourselves in that says, if I go ahead and vote progressive for a president, right, and a vice president, if I vote progressive for a party, then that'll just fix everything. That's actually reflective of the culture that we live in. We live in a culture that says, I want to fix it right now. This microwave type of thinking that says that everything is a quick fix, and it's not. It's not. In fact, what often happens is you'll have a well-intentioned leader at the top of the thing, holding the highest office in the land, but that progression doesn't make it to the places where it's needed the most. You remember this because when my forever president was in office, he had a bunch of policies that he wanted to pass that were extremely progressive, and there was a complete all-out war from the other side of the aisle that said we're going to block and dismantle everything that he tries to do, even if it's in line with our value, just because we don't want to see him succeed. I'm not making that up. That's a real thing. And for 8 years, even though he was extremely progressive from a political standpoint, right, in terms of policy, he was extremely progressive, but those things didn't make it to where they needed it the most. And so then what ends up happening, because there isn't local leadership in place, because we don't show up and then put the people in place that we need to forward the agenda on a federal level, then in terms of state and local politics, it doesn't happen for our people in a way that's transformative. So think about when my forever president is in office and then the housing crisis still happens. Forever presidents in office, don't get it wrong, a bunch of things that happen well, but that affects a certain class. There are people, there are the least of these who are left to struggle because the high idea doesn't play out in terms of the function for day-to-day working class people. We are in a moment where there is so much going on nationally, and these local elections in particular have implications toward those things. If you're in Minnesota, the reality of CRT and whether or not that can even be taught in schools, there's stuff on the ballot, and there are leaders that are being voted in that will determine that. That's a local issue, and those are local elections that will determine how that goes. In Texas, they're talking about banning abortions. There's literally federal government trying to tell people what to do with their bodies, and then voting laws on top of that telling you how to vote and when you can vote. This is nothing new. This is exactly what was going on in the 50s and 60s. And let me break that down a little bit. In the 50s and 60s, the idea was we don't want these people to vote because if they vote, then they won't vote with our interest. We can't necessarily stop them from voting because technically they can. So what do? We put things in place that make it hard for them to vote. We tell you that in order to vote, you got to pass a test. Tell you that in order to vote, you got to have 8 billion things of ID. and then you don't have any ID, right? We tell you that if you want to vote, then you can't have a record. It's just all these other things to suppress the vote, which then mutes the voice of the people, and then the laws never change. Those things are still happening present day in Texas. That's a huge thing. I'm a New Yorker through and through. In New York City, state funding for public schools is a huge thing in the city. Again, that's not a federal thing. That's a local thing. State funding for public schools. There is a general understanding, probably in most parts of the country, that suggests that if you go to public school, that's a lower grade of education than you would a private school. And many of our people work our hustle, and we work our networks through the village to try to make sure that we can do all that we can in order to make sure that our children get a quality education. Even if I use an address that's not in the community that I live in, brothers and sisters, we shouldn't have to do that. And in the state of New York right now, and on the ballot is going to be whether or not there should be state funding for public schools. And there are going to be people who are on either end of that are running for public office. In Georgia, where the minimum wage is $7.25, parenthetically, can you imagine how crazy it is to have a living wage, to have a minimum wage that doesn't equal out to what a living wage is? So literally there's local government in place, trying to suggest that we want to help you make just enough money to not be poor. That's crazy to me. And that's a local issue. In the state that I live in Ohio, there are school boards and municipal government that's in place. There are all these ballots around how we think about redistricting. Your neighborhood looks the way that it does for a reason. Your neighborhood is your neighborhood for a reason. And most people end up being districted in a way to where they're looking at prosperity while they're living in poverty. That is going to be on the ballot. Across the nation, there are all these protections and these conversations around gig economy. So if I Uber, so if I Lyft, so if I Uber Eat, should I be able to have insurance? Should I have all of the benefits? Should I be protected in the same way that full-time employees do? Across the country, that is on people's ballot. These are things that don't come up when the president is running for office. These are local issues. So it is extremely important that we go out and vote. When we create the habit that says that we only vote in the primaries, but not in the general elections, when we don't vote in these local elections in that way, what that ends up doing is it mutes our voices. So I don't think there's anything wrong with us. But what I do think is that we don't necessarily understand our power. When we go vote, laws change. When we go vote, then we take power, we snatch power from those who are powerful. When we go vote, our communities change. When we go vote, our babies have more opportunity. So why go vote? Why would I do all this? Why would I spend all this time and sit in line? Why go vote? Because more important than the general elections is that progress doesn't make it down to those who need it. If we are serious, and Gail, for me, that's the question. If we are serious, then it can't be that we just vote every 4 years and then hope that everything will be okay. We have to be connected to the habit of liberation. We have to be connected to the habit of progress. So even if we don't want to, we have to still make up in our minds that I want to see a win. I want us to get there. And progress doesn't make it to those who need it the most if we don't show up and vote, not just in the big elections, but in the local ones as well. We should vote in local elections because we want to know who's driving. Listen, I don't know how you feel about it, but if I have to be in the car, I want to know that the driver is going where I'm headed. So if I have to be in the American car, if I have to be in the Ohioan car, I want to make sure that the drivers go in the direction I'm going. And wouldn't it be crazy to get in a car with somebody who isn't going where I'm going and then get mad that I'm not where I'm at? That's insane. We have to make sure that when we have the opportunity to pick the drivers, that we are picking folk that we're value aligned with. Now, let me be very clear about what I'm saying so that way you don't think I'm suggesting anything. Listen, not all skin folk are kinfolk, and not everybody that's an elephant or a donkey is necessarily on our side. We should be very clear about understanding policy and understanding platform, and not everybody that's driving is going where we're going, y'all. So in local elections, we want to make sure we're putting people in place who are headed in the direction that we're headed, who have the best interest of our community, who have the best interest of our people, and that we're able to hold accountable. Why go vote? Why go vote in local elections? Because there is a difference between power and performance. Here's where I make you uncomfortable. Here's where Gail might not invite me back. But if there is anything wrong with my people, and be clear, I love my people to life. But if there is anything wrong with our people, we have allowed ourselves to fall into a moment where we think performance is the same thing as power. When you perform, you're demonstrating something, but nothing changes. If I were preaching, I would ask somebody to say amen right there. When you perform, it's for a moment, but nothing changes. When you have power, you have the ability to change your circumstances in the way that you want them to be. So be clear, when I vote for the president, that's a moment, right? And I'm exercising my power in that space. But if all I do is do that every 4 years, that's not a consistent posture of power. I want to make sure that I'm operating in power in every way that I can to change the things that I want to see changed in my community. And if all I want to do is complain, and all I want to do is march, and all I want to do is post and tweet about it, if all I want to do is sit and blame people for it, but never do anything transformative, that's not a powerful position. That's nothing more than performance. And what we need in our community are more people who are connected to building power and less folk who just are here for the performance. So why go vote? Why go vote? Because the people who do not have our interest are going to vote. Be very clear, brothers and sisters, that there are people who do not want to see the liberation of our people. There are people who do not want to see our people prosper. There are people who still want poor people to be poor. There are people who do not want our babies to be educated. There are people who want to preserve a certain trope of American exceptionalism, and they are going to the polls. So we have to outwork our oppressor. Why go vote? Because our ability and position in this moment require us to. Now, I'm so grateful for the opportunity. I love being able to talk to y'all, but listen, I am a pastor through and through. And if you thought that you were going to get all the way through me running my mouth without me giving you at least 2 minutes of Bible study, you must be crazy. There is a sister in the Old Testament by the name of Esther. She is a Hebrew sister, and she is dealing with the reality of oppression. Her people are oppressed. Her people are oppressed, and they deal with all of the things that come with oppression, because it's not just physical oppression, it's psychological oppression, right? It's institutional oppression. They are dealing with the reality of oppression. The king at the time is King Xerxes, and Xerxes is in rule. He is oppressing folk over and over and over again. Xerxes banishes his wife because he can't deal with a woman that is able to speak her mind. Don't miss that. Xerxes has a wife, but he banishes his wife from the kingdom because she had something to say, because she ain't gonna sit here and be quiet. So he banishes his wife, and the next wife that he takes is a woman by the name of Esther. Watch this. He fools with Esther, but he doesn't really care about Esther or Esther's people. He fools with Esther, but Esther's people don't matter to him. He fools with Esther, but Hebrew lives don't matter. He fools with Esther, but he's not connected to the liberation of Esther's people. But he fools with Esther because it makes him look good. And Esther sees the tribulation and the trial of her people. And because she's connected to the king, she has the opportunity to say something about it. Her uncle Mordecai says, baby, you have the opportunity to make change. You have the opportunity to make things different. You have the opportunity to make things better. You have the opportunity to lift your voice. You have the opportunity to at least push towards liberation. And Esther is scared because she says, if I say something, it may cost me something. Don't miss that. If I say something, it might cost me something. If I say something, it might make me unpopular. If I say something, I might not get invited out. If I say something, it might mean that people unfriend me. If I say something, people on the gram might see me as radical. She gets scared. And in the 4th chapter and the 14th verse, watch what Esther's uncle says to her, says, for if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your family will perish. And who knows that you have come to your position for such a time as this. Brothers and sisters, we are sitting in Esther's seat, and we have the opportunity to work not only for our families, but for the liberation of our people. So why go vote? Because we are afforded the space by the creator of the universe, the God of justice and righteousness, to be in this position in this moment for such a time as this. So why go vote? Because our position requires us to. Why go vote? Because our people require us to. So why go vote? Because if we don't vote, then things won't change. Why go vote? Because when we vote, things always change. So I'm asking everybody. Gail gave all of the websites that I was going to give today, but please, ma'am, please, sir, go out and vote. Go out and vote in your local elections and bring as many people as you can with you. These elections are even more important than the more popular elections. And then do your research. Don't be a dumb voter. Go and do your research the same way that you look stuff up on the internet. Look up what's going to be on your local ballot. See where you come down, and then make a powerful move. Exercise your power with regard to the vote. I pray that made some sense. God bless you. Thank you.
Listen, I was over here like, preach, brother. I don't know if you saw half the comments because they were going, but they're like, preach, sir. Hester said, Esther's people are oppressed. Pastor Timothy Carpenter on here is about, come on, sir. You had a preaching. You had us yelling back at you. That's for sure.
Amen.
Thank you so much. I love it. I love it. And y'all notice when he said he was going to give the same websites, that's what we do. We go through, we research these things, y'all. We're researching it. Let me see what John Gore is saying in here. I see John Gore in here. John Gore says silence and action is not an option. There you go. Right. Boom. There you go. Yeah. So, wow, this was all the way live. Y'all, that's y'all's inspirational message for today as well. Just go ahead and have a praise break right about now, because that was fire. That was fire. Amen. Thank you so much. Y'all, we cannot stress how important these elections are. Yeah. If there's one issue on the ballot, go and vote. Y'all, this whole redistricting is real. And they're still unfolding where the map lines will be drawn and how they will be drawn. And that all came from out of the census. And, now we got to wait 10 years to do that again. But y'all, all of these things that you hear and that we're talking about, we're not just talking about them. They're real. They need this information. We need to know what to do. So I cannot thank you enough. Thank you for joining us this morning. Y'all, for those of you who are News in Motion Patreon members, do not forget tonight is the wealth building on Zoom. You already have that email if you are a patron for News in Motion. If you're saying, well, how can I become a patron? That's a good question. Thanks for asking. You can go to patreon.com, www.patreon.com/newsinmotion. It is $15 a month, and you are getting all kinds of content. We've done credit building, credit resources with Dr. Kim Carter. We're doing wealth building tonight. We've had other Zoom meetings. Thanksgiving is coming up. We had that Friendsgiving or whatever it's called. I don't even know what it's called. Last year, we're thinking about doing that again this year, and we had a great time. So let us know. You can go to patreon.com/newsinmotion. I know we went a little over today, but it was all good.
Are you ready to raise awareness of your brand, product, or service? Gail, the host of News in Motion and the Mosa Friday podcast, is an influencer who brings attention to every product she mentions. She started out with a few followers and is growing her base daily. Listeners, tune in Monday through Friday from around the U.S. and beyond. Let Gail help you expand and connect with new customers from all around. To get your brand, product, or services mentioned on her shows, just contact info.gaildudley@gmail.com to request her media deck. Catch Gail each weekday on News in Motion on Facebook Live at facebook.com/newsinmotion or her YouTube at youtube.com/Gail Dudley. You can also follow Gail on Instagram and Twitter at Gail Dudley and visit her website, www.gaildudley.com. Until next week, as Gail always signs off, stay well and remember to make some moves.